Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for Enhancing Digital Accessibility for Neurodiverse Job Seekers and Employees. My name is Joseph Pevsner, and I am the Director of Research, Strategy, and Product Development for the National Organization on Disability. I'm a white man in my 30s with long brown hair and a scraggly beard, wearing a purple and green tartan shirt. Importantly, I identify as a person with a disability. I have multiple sclerosis. Now I'm going to give everybody a couple of seconds to jump in, make sure we don't start without everyone. In the meantime, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're zooming in from, and feel free to share your LinkedIn to connect with others. All right, amazing. I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping notes before we begin today's discussion. This webinar is being recorded, and a closed caption version will be shared with you via email in the next couple of days. If you would like to view closed captions now, please select the live transcript button on your Zoom toolbar located at the bottom of your window and press Show Subtitles. As you can see, we have ASL interpreters signing today. Thank you so much for being here. For any questions, please select the Q&A button on the toolbar, enter your question in the box, and click Send. We have a packed conversation and can't promise we'll be able to address every comment, but we will definitely do our best. At the end of the webinar, we'll launch a simple survey we hope that you'll take just a couple of moments to complete. This is critical in helping us shape our program. Lastly, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our partners and Leadership Council members for their continuous support, which allows us to furnish high-quality educational content and make meaningful strides in the pursuit of equitable opportunities for the millions of Americans with disabilities. To learn more about accomplishing our shared mission, please throw your email in the chat or contact Paulina Romero at council@nod.org. Okay, today's discussion takes on special significance as we recognize Global Accessibility Awareness Day, or GAD. GAD is dedicated to raising awareness about digital access and inclusion for the more than 1 billion people worldwide living with disabilities. GAD reminds us that accessibility isn't just a technical checklist. It's an opportunity to reflect on the role that each and every one of us plays in creating environments that are accessible and equitable for all. Today, we'll be focusing on how this applies specifically to hiring technologies and workplace design, and how thoughtful, accessible approaches can open doors for talent too often left out of the conversation. By the end of today's webinar, we hope you'll walk away with a deeper understanding of the challenges, and more importantly, the opportunities to make our workplaces more accessible and inclusive for everyone. A key part of this work is understanding neurodiversity, the natural variation in how people think, process information, and interact with the world. This includes, but is not limited to, individuals with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and other cognitive differences. We'll dive into neurodivergent representation in the workforce, explore how mental health and neurodivergence often intersect, and examine common digital barriers, including sensory overload, rigid processes, and inaccessible platforms, which stand in the way of equitable hiring. Whether you're a designer, developer, educator, content creator, or leader, this conversation is for you. This conversation is for anyone committed to building a more inclusive workplace. But first, let's get a little more understanding of who we have with us today in the audience. On the screen, you'll see a poll that I would love for all of you to answer. It reads, what percentage of the world's top 1 million web pages are not accessible? We'll give 15 seconds or so for people to answer. Great. Alex, if you wouldn't mind pulling those results up. Okay. It looks like the majority of folks, or at least the plurality of folks, believe that the answer was 80 to 90% at 44%. That's not too far off. But I'm here to tell you that multiple studies have shown that over 90%, in fact, a whopping 96% of the top 1 million websites have at least one detectable accessibility issue, emphasizing how widespread accessibility remains. And most of those websites have more than one accessibility issue. Now, this is not just about websites. Digital accessibility affects real people in real ways every day through web applications, digital content, social media, the list goes on. In fact, roughly 20% of the population, including over 6 million people in the US alone, rely on assistive technology to navigate the digital world. From things like captions, screen readers, to voice input tools. When systems are not designed with accessibility in mind, these tools can't do their job. Now imagine you're trying to apply for a job with a platform that times out before your screen reader finishes loading the page, or you're navigating a lengthy application with no way to pause or save progress. These are the kinds of barriers that disproportionately affect people with disabilities who already face higher rates of unemployment, underemployment, lack of opportunity, and exclusion. Now that we've established the importance of accessibility and the role that neurodiversity plays in shaping inclusive workplaces, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce someone who lives and leads this work every day. Joining us is Andrew Holbrook, the Chief Accessibility Officer at Wells Fargo, to discuss tools and tactics that they're implementing to ensure inclusive hiring.
Joseph, thank you. It is an honor to be here as part of this program. Let me just start by saying happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day to everyone. Yes, it's a very, very exciting day. I always look forward to this day every year. Let me start with a brief physical description of me. I am a white male. I am seated in an office location wearing a blue suit and a cream colored shirt, glasses, and headphones, which the headphones help me. I am hard of hearing. I've been wearing hearing aids since I was 7 years old. And it is, I guess the last thing I have to share is that my hair is graying. It is salt and pepper, more salt every day. With that, I'm truly honored to be here, and part of what I like to share with everyone is that at Wells Fargo, we've been an accessibility leader since 1852, and I say that with some level of confidence. Our founder, one of our co-founders, Henry Wells, had a pronounced stutter. This is something which informed his professional career. It informed the foundations of Wells Fargo. And it is something which we to this day reflect the mission that he brought into financial services as a person with a disability. And so it's something that I like to call this out, that this isn't new. This isn't something flash in the pan. This is something that is part and parcel of what we hope to deliver for our customers, our clients, and our communities. And to that, you skip ahead from 1852 to the present day, there are multiple hallmarks of Wells Fargo's involvement in digital accessibility in particular, and that in the 1970s, we helped provide funding for some of the earliest screen readers that to this day are leveraged by people that are blind or of low vision, or just people who prefer a screen reader. In 1999, we introduced the nation's first talking ATM. And this is to this day, if you use a Wells Fargo ATM, that technology still exists. And it is all of the interactions exist that on our ATMs can be done purely through audio interactions and prompts. 2003, we were the first US bank to have our website certified by the National Federation of the Blind. And this is important because if you think about some of the places where we are now in terms of digital accessibility, this is at a time before there had been, let's call it, some common frameworks in which to adjudicate whether or not to judge whether or not something is accessible or not. And so that brings me to me. So we are the first major US bank to have a chief accessibility office. I've been the Chief Accessibility Officer now for a little over a year. And so this is a great tradition that I am excited to continue. Since it is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, one of the things that I like to highlight more globally in regards to our digital accessibility commitment is that late last year, we set as Wells Fargo's benchmark that we are managing to of WCAG 2.1 A and AA. I know for those of you that are familiar with with digital accessibility, you know what this means. For those that may not be familiar with it, in essence, there are some standards that have been established by a few organizations, and this is one of them. And there seems to be a growing coalescence around this standard. We, Wells Fargo, are hoping to continue to propel that so that we create the critical mass, that we help create the critical mass that delivers digital accessibility to those 96% of websites that are still experiencing accessibility challenges. But that's the road we're on, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the other things we've done specifically around employment, specifically around employment focused on neurodiverse individuals. And let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. And while we're doing that, let me just share that part of what drives my work in this space is that my parents taught children with autism for 3 decades. It is, once I entered the private sector, entered the workforce, it was something which I had had great exposure to people with different neurodiverse tendencies. And it was a surprise to me when I got to the workforce and that community was underrepresented relative to the community in which I was operating. And so it's exciting to be now part of a workforce that is growing in its acceptance, but not just acceptance, but recognition that there's incredible talent that has been left on the sidelines due to historical challenges. And so we continue to try to address those challenges here at Wells Fargo and elsewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and pivot back to the slide. If we wouldn't mind sharing that slide again, I do want to call out our disability inclusion at Wells Fargo. So the slide that I'm sharing is a screenshot from our wellsfargojobs.com website focusing around inclusion and disability. I call out that if you are a job applicant that has an accommodation need or is an applicant with a disability, we encourage everyone to contact our accommodation request at wellsfargo.com email or to call by phone the number that is offered on our website. These are the same tools that employees, or rather this is the same contact group that our employees leverage. So we're able to leverage the expertise of the totality of Wells Fargo and its 200,000 plus employees and its more than 60 million customers and clients to help deliver tools for people with disabilities that might be interested in having a career with Wells Fargo, which I would say uh, I think is a great opportunity, and it's worked out very well for me. But what I would like to talk about now is really, well, what about neurodiverse community? And so let's go to the next slide on this one. There we go. So if you're not familiar, Wells Fargo has a neurodiversity program. This is something which is really focused on facilitating a more considerate, accommodating, and skills-based hiring model. So I'm really interested in some of the other presenters that'll be here that are operating under a similar mindset, if you will. The next slide, this model is meant to be accessible by design. I can't take credit for this work. Again, standing on the shoulders of giants, if you will, in that Stephen DeStefani is the person who stood up this program with incredible support from our head of consumer, small, and business banking, Saul Van Beurden. This is something which I was there when we had our first 4 hires, but we are now at over 300 hires as part of this program. And so, yeah, it's exciting. It's been a great program for us. Within the chat, we can drop in the links to this so that you can find out all the great things associated with this program on your own. But if you go to the next slide, I do want to highlight a couple of things, which is this is a program that launched in April of 2020, and it is expanded from a group of hires focused on technology to incorporate significant parts of our bank. It is something which, whereas neurodiverse individuals have always been at Wells Fargo, creating a program like this helps, we think, create an opportunity for career advancement and to acknowledge and to recognize this community and really tap into the talent that is there that we may not have fully recognized before 2020. So the Wells Fargo Neurodiversity Program website, which I do believe is in the chat. If it's not, we'll drop it in there. There's a bunch of materials into how to get involved, how to, if you're interested in roles or opportunities at Wells Fargo, how to get engaged, but also just to learn more about how the program works, because it is what Stephen and the team have put together is just an incredible model, and it's something which we continue to try to share with the world globally, if you will. To that last point, let me just point to this last page, if you will, and that is, the neurodiversity program can also be contacted. There is a website there, Wells Fargo Neurodiversity Program at wellsfargo.com. I'm not going to add, I am so appreciative of our ASL interpreters for spelling this out. That's a big one. You can also watch videos where you can learn more about the program and how it works, to see if you're interested, to see if you would like to learn more. But last but not least, I would just say that from a digital accessibility perspective, this program has been a great proving ground for us. And one of the things that I like to highlight, and maybe we'll talk about this a little later, is great ideas have come from participants in this program. And that is testament to the neurodiverse community, that ideas that in our 170 years nobody had come up with, this community, by tapping into it, is bringing those ideas, and it's making us a better and stronger company. So with that, Joseph, I pass it back, the virtual microphone, to you, and look forward to learning more about what's going on in this space.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate you sharing with us today. And I know personally from having worked with you and Wells Fargo over the past few years, how much energy and effort you put into both your accessibility work and your disability inclusion work, both in the US and globally. We'll look forward to welcoming you back towards the end of the webinar to answer some of our audience questions. Next, to help us dive a little bit deeper into what inclusion actually looks like for people with who are neurodiverse in practice, I'm thrilled to welcome Kendra Evans, Director, Spectrum Support Programs at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Kendra, welcome to the screen.
Thank you for having me, Joseph, and happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day to everyone that's here. My name is Kendra Evans. I am a middle-aged woman with medium-length blondish hair. I am very well branded for my institution, which is RIT today. That is my background. That is my black zip-up jacket. And I have very large black glasses, kind of making a caricature of a human face, and that's visual for those of you who are interested. I typically talk very loud and very fast. You may want to turn the volume down on the screen for us today, and I'll do my best to go ahead and talk a little softer. Joseph, do you mind putting up the first slide? One of the things that I know about all brains is that we like to know what to expect, and I also like to keep myself on track. And so what you can expect from me today is a very brief overview of a few, research topics. And from there, I'm going to talk about best practices that has come from the research and also what it is that I do at RIT. Specifically, RIT created one of the first autism support programs in the country for higher education. We started in 2008 with 12 students, and as of fall term of this year, we have a professional learning community of over 120 autistic students at RIT. We support the transition from high school to college. We work with our students all the way through college. We're so grateful to be on the journey with them. And we also now have the Neurodiverse Hiring Initiative, which is what most of my insights will come from today, that helps support our students as they transition again, this time from college to career. So we're very lucky to be working with this very diverse group of individuals, and I'm excited to have one of my students here today who's a student leader, and we'll talk more about our Neurodiverse Student Association and some of the great advances that we've been making throughout the years. So why don't we jump into some research first, Joseph?
Kendra, can I interrupt you for just one moment, please?
You sure can.
So we've gotten some word from audience members that we're experiencing difficulties with the slides interrupting the ASL interpreters.
Oh, okay.
So unfortunately, we're going to need to forego slides for the rest of the presentation so that we can ensure the ASL interpreters are on the screen.
Oh, gotcha. So I should just be talking, but there will be no visuals.
Unfortunately, we're very sorry about that. For everyone on the webinar, we will have the slides as part of the recording, and we'll make sure that we share those out with the recording of the webinar.
Thanks for that update, because I wouldn't have known. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to give some overviews of three primary research studies that are relatively new. There's a neurodiversity at work research study that came out in 2023, really highlighting that neurodiversity-friendly recruitment strategies lead to both improved diversity of thought and diversity of the workforce, but they also lead to employee retention and productivity. The second research document that I'm going to pull from is from 2024. It talks about the insights into creating and managing an inclusive neurodiverse workplace. And specifically, again, they highlight the need to reconfigure the recruitment process, foster inclusive cultures within each workplace environment, and ensure equitable supervision to maximize employee and organizational outcomes. And I'll pause for a second there because I love the concept and the overarching theory behind equitable supervision, because as we know, equity is different than equal. Equitable means that we're giving each person what they need. And so when we talk about designing equitable supervision, to me, that talks about universal design in the workplace, and it's just best practices for management. One of the pushbacks that I have found is from colleagues within organizations who are worried about reverse discrimination, as if you're giving a neurodivergent individual something special that everybody could benefit from. And so when we talk about equitable supervision, the idea that we can make a best fit workplace for everyone helps to reduce stigma across the board and increase productivity across the board. And so I'll get more into equitable supervision and ways to just tailor your management style to meet all of your employees' needs. And then the last study that I'll talk about a little bit has to do with career guidance and employment issues for neurodivergent individuals. This is another one that just came out last year. And specifically, it talks about tailored career guidance as well as industry-specific employment interventions, meaning while you're employed, we're going to talk about best fit practices and how can we advance your career. I feel as though in my work, it's always the next frontier. First, there were more and more neurodivergent students coming to college, and now there's more and more entering the workplace. But a key concept is the idea that employability is not the terminal outcome. Yes, I want all of my students to get that first job, but I also want them to advance and get the second job and move from a job into that meaningful, purposeful career that they're training for here at RIT. And so I really look forward to us pushing the envelope so that it's not just a hiring initiative, but how are we retaining and advancing all of our neurodivergent talent? So I'm going to get some overarching best practices, and then I'm going to break that down even further to talk about things that can happen pre-employment with both talent and employers, and then also during employment so that we can talk about retention and advancement for our neurodivergent workers. So first and foremost, I want to start with the concept that we need to make well-being and inclusion a priority for everyone. This is about setting that culture of inclusion, setting the idea that we want a work-life balance and that we're going to talk about these things. I mentioned universal design earlier, and it actually is a concept that comes from architecture, right? This idea that if I design an environment for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, right, the tail ends of the bell curve, then almost everyone within the middle of that is going to be accessible. When I started my career as a preschool teacher, and I've just basically followed my students all the way through to employment, I was taught in those classes that I'm supposed to teach to the middle of the bell curve, right? I teach to where the most people are. And in truth, that's the antithesis of universal design, and that's the antithesis of best practice. So the overarching thought that I want to give to all managers on this call and to program leaders like myself is that one size doesn't fit all. And the more we can bring our authentic selves as managers and directors and leaders, sharing our dimensions of diversity and disability, as well as some of our vulnerabilities and needs that make us unique. Sometimes this has to do with caregiving for a parent or caregiving for a child, being a veteran. There's lots of different statuses. And if we can acknowledge that for everyone, inevitably, it has led to better experiences for not just neurotypical individuals, but neurodivergent as well. So step one is to have this culture of inclusion and really prioritize well-being for all. With any good program, we need to evaluate and promote the effectiveness of these actions that we're doing to really find out and target what's working for whom and how we can really benchmark the quality and see how we're taking it to the next level in order to do proof of concept and to move things forward. Specifically, I want to talk about focusing on relationships. This ties back into that equitable supervision. I need to know my team in order to support my team. And that in general, anything that happens in the workplace, it shouldn't really be transactional. It should be relationship building so that we can foster a sense of psychological safety for every member on the team. And that happens through manager training and colleague training. And then lastly, we want to think about what kind of systems and policies and procedures do we have in place that develop the careers and ambitions of all of our employees, specifically our neurodivergent employees, so that we can move past employability and past surviving to thriving. And so that's my overarching concept of the best practices I have read about and experienced with my students and my work with our employer partners. Now I want to talk about specific strategies that can help the pre-employment process. And for the first part, I'm going to talk about the talent. So my students, for example, things that I have found helpful in developing their confidence, their preparedness, and their overall job placements. One thing that's really important is to take a strengths and assets-based approach, as well as really learning about the interests. I have students that can take a deep dive into one or more subjects. And when you can combine that passion with their hard skill set, you can find something that's going to be a great career opportunity. And it's about exploring that and developing self-awareness and advocacy during these college years and during the pre-employment, so that they're better able to make a choice that's going to work for them, as well as advocate when they're in the career zone. On that, working with our career coordinators for a broader career exploration within their industry, like what is a good fit for my skills, my passions, and my talent. So that comes after that skills assessment, so that they have a great understanding of themselves. Some of the research that I was reading is that the number one of the biggest problems in securing in advancing neurodivergent talent is this concept of disclosure, right? Because that is very unique to the individual, and not everyone feels comfortable disclosing in every work environment or for every interview. And so it's really very critical in this pre-employment stage to talk about the options for disclosure, the methods for disclosure, who I could talk to and when, what does that mean? How can my accommodations from the university translate into the workforce? What are some of my resources and how will I be able to do that? So this really is talking about and building up all of those individual assets and being prepared to share them. And then the three biggest things that we work on with our neurodiverse hiring initiative is building the confidence through our students with experiential learning, leadership opportunities, and really kind of on-site experiential learning. We also do a lot of skill practice beyond the assumed knowledge of resumes and interviews and the general process, but how do we build our network? And Grace can share with you that that is our number one theme. We know from numerous studies that over 50% of job placements come from a warm handshake, right? That personal connection. And so if in general, my neurodivergent students come with a smaller social and professional network than their neurotypical peers, one of the keys to success is to build that network. And we at RIT do that through a lot of alternative travel programs where we go to various cities to tour different headquarters so that we can actually see what it's like to be in the job, like a job shadowing, an informational interview, to see what that's like, so that students can apply all of those things that I talked about at the beginning, their strengths, their assets, and industry fit in order to pick a place that's going to really work for them. So if those are some of the best practices for pre-employment for our job seekers, how about the employers? I have two big opportunities in terms of building that culture. The first is that idea of neurodiversity training for colleagues and managers. And this can come from formal training, such as that's offered by Optimize and other organizations in order to build awareness for neurodiversity, build awareness for inclusive communication and other strategies, but also from neurodivergent members of the professional community already, so that they can share their lived experience and build that sense of belonging so that everyone's ready. Part of the training that I feel is very important is that concept of we all have sensory preferences. Some of us like bright lights. Some of us need those off or we're going to get migraines. Some of us like to have music playing while we work. Others like to have no music whatsoever. Some of us are morning people. Some of us are evening people. And the more you can talk about our uniqueness and the willingness for supervisors to accommodate that, the better it's going to be for everybody that's involved. And so to begin that work ahead of time is really important. And then before you even try to hire my talent, I always encourage employers to revamp those JDQs and job postings so that they are succinct, that they are direct. We delineate between nice to have skills and must have skills, nice to have trainings and must have trainings, and to ensure that we're placing for a skills focus as opposed to a personality or a presentation. And then finally, especially as we're talking about, technical accessibility, digital accessibility, I want to strongly encourage everyone. The cognitive and personality tests or the self-paced tutorials and webinars are not hits with my job seekers. I have not yet actually had a student that felt that that was a good reflection of their ability and skill set and how they would be an asset. So I typically coach the employers that I work with to avoid those kinds of tools. And as far as recruitment, urge everyone to give the questions in advance, and that benefits neurotypical and neurodivergent. You want to know, if you want to know who thinks on their feet, that's one thing, but most of the time I want to hire someone that is prepared, who is less anxious, who is able to bring their best self. So please give the questions in advance. Likewise, share the itinerary that includes the timeline and who I'm going to meet with and where I'm going to be, and plan breaks in. And in addition, if you're doing a larger group setting, look for ways to make it more sensory friendly, like a reverse career fair and online information sessions or smaller group information sessions, so that we're not excluding people unintentionally because of the sensory overload. So if those are things that talented employers can do before being hired, there's a lot that can happen once you're on the job site. And so the concept of physical and mental well-being, it's documented pretty well that, if I were to use a broad stroke, that neurodivergent individuals don't ask for help as readily as other employees. It's also a difficulty when you can see in one of the research studies when the sources are shared, but the concept of taking care of mental and physical well-being, that idea of prioritizing self-care, is something that my job seekers struggle with. And so if an organization can prioritize that, that's incredibly important. One of the ways to demonstrate that is through employee resource groups, so that it helps to build community among everyone within the organization, and it helps to share strategies and to give different methods for mentorship and peer connection. Going back to that equitable supervision, everyone in the organization benefits from knowing a clear communication channel. When am I supposed to use Slack versus email? When am I supposed to reach out to my boss versus my peer? Who is it that I can ask what question to? And when can I ask those questions? So being very explicit with all of your employees about what the cadence of meetings will be and when should I bring a question in person. Be direct. Don't assume that anybody on your team is going to know exactly what's in your particular thought bubble. Obviously, while you're there, look to remove barriers. Take surveys from every employee to find out what is making the workplace a challenge, and work to address those. And it's also important for all people that you're managing to continually reevaluate the job fit and to allow for career exploration. And you can do that through mentoring and coaching and the ability to job shadow in other areas, so that we are really focusing on the advancement of our neurodivergent employees. And then I did want to talk about AI use for employability and career success very briefly, because one of the things that we do in our program is use AI now to do employer deep dives. How can I learn as much as possible about an employer prior to going into the interview? AI already is very, very good at getting that for you. It can also tailor your resume and cover letters to each individual employer, and that can be a barrier for my students in terms of just the level that's needed in terms of applications. And so to use technology in that way is great. Some of the advanced options are creating gems if you're using Gemini from Google, or agents if you're using Copilot, and you can create a persona that could mimic your hiring manager or your supervisor, and use that to engage, to practice how would I have a difficult conversation, to generate interview questions, to give more low stress ways to practice and prepare for what's coming. And there also are a lot of time savers. I can have Gemini recording in the background, and it will give me my follow-up options and my takeaway notes, things that I as a supervisor used to have to write up for everyone to provide after my meetings. Now it can be done for me. So while I don't think that AI is going to replace me, I think people who use AI better than I do will. And so I try to prepare my students to be able to utilize that particular technology effectively. And then just, this will be my last comment, is where are we going with all of this? I think it's very important that we really start to investigate career guidance for our neurodivergent employees. We need to move past employability and into lasting, meaningful career choices. And so that's an area for additional focus. It's also important to investigate career changes among our neurodivergent employees. Why are they moving? Are they getting promoted? How are we doing once we get our students into their particular industry? And an area that I think is woefully unexplored, just as we've had more students coming to college and now into careers, retirement is going to be coming. And so how are we, in fact, exploring financial literacy and interesting options for every age and stage of our neurodivergent employee? And so with that, since I have no more slides, Joseph, is it my turn to introduce my student? Is that where we're at? Fantastic.
Yes, please.
Fabulous. So I'm not going to say much about her other than she's basically been my right-hand woman for the last 3 years. She has started out as a young college student and is now a leader of most all things that have to do with our spectrum support program and our hiring initiative. And so without further ado, Grace, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Grace. I'm a fifth year computer engineering tech student at RIT. I came into the SSP program after my second year, so I was a little bit of a latecomer to the program. And after a few years, I am now a peer mentor and really involved with the NHI to help those other younger students who are where I was get to wherever they are hoping to go. So I agreed with so many of Kendra's points. Two things that I really want to elaborate on was really helpful from the student side of things are exposure and repetition. The exposure to all these different networking and career opportunities. One great example of this, I was a part of the New York City trip, the first New York City trip NHI had, where we spent a week in the big city and met with all these different employers, which was a huge, awesome networking opportunity. But one thing I think that people maybe didn't think about as much was I have a diagnosis of autism, and that comes with a lot of sensory responsibilities. And New York City is giant, it is smelly, and it is really, really loud. And my parents were really nervous about me being on my own, basically, in New York City for a week, because I used to have meltdowns in grocery stores. And I had a job offer about 2 days before our trip was going in another big city of Washington, D.C., where I would be on my own for a year. So it really took that exposure to the city for the week, because if you can handle New York City, you can handle any city. That really helped convince myself and my family that I would be fine on my own in DC. So allowing students to have opportunities like that, where they're pushed a little farther outside their comfort zone, is really valuable to them in ways that you may not expect, but is absolutely worth trying out. And the repetition side of things is something that I think is not unique to neurotypical people at whatsoever. I think it's something that neurotypical and neurodivergent members absolutely benefit from. And all it is learning of the skills and repeating them ad infinitum. So mock interviews, resume reviews, strategies for interpersonal conflict, all those strategies that sometimes neurodivergent people need to be specifically taught rather than is intuitive. And all you do is do it over and over and over and over again. So that's really, I think, the two bases, what's going to be most successful from a student side of things. It isn't that exciting, I'm afraid, a lot of the times, but I think just repeating those basics is super valuable.
Thank you so much, Grace and Kendra, for sharing your perspectives on accessibility and neurodiversity inclusion in the workplace. What I'd like to do now is bring all of our amazing speakers back on screen and take some questions from the audience. As a reminder, please enter your questions in the Q&A box in Zoom, not in the chat. We will only see them and be able to get to them if you enter them in the Q&A. Okay, let's start with a question for Andrew. What accessibility features can make a significant difference for neurodivergent job seekers and employees, particularly during things like online assessments or video interviews?
And Joseph, I love the question because I'm a very simple person, and that I think sometimes we overlook and ignore that very simple things such as the right font and the right color contrast of that font is hugely impactful. And so I know at Wells Fargo, we've integrated Atkinson Hyperlegible as a font that can be used because of feedback that we were getting from people with dyslexia in particular about inability to consume some of the content they were experiencing as part of that. I think it was great to first of all, Grace, your comments, you put a smile on my face talking about the smells and the lights of New York City. As a resident of San Francisco, any time that New York City gets called out as being an inhospitable environment makes me happy. So, and all you fans of New York, you can direct your comments towards me. Uh, but I think also, just that very simple part, those very simple things from a text perspective are important. From a video perspective, I think it's the same principle. Keep it simple. It is. I think there are sometimes those of us that like to consume visual arts sometimes get enamored of complex presentations. Keep it simple. That is the one thing that we continue to strive for here at Wells Fargo. But thanks for the question, Joseph.
Thank you. That was a fantastic answer, Andrew. Our next question is directed towards Kendra. What lessons from the education space specifically, especially when it comes to accommodating neurodiverse learners, can be applied to the workplace environment?
I want to build on what Grace said. When we do our surveys of students, you know what our skill set is being repetitively persuasive. And so to be able to preview, to be able to guide through, to be able to just demonstrate what's happening. One of the things that I have found that was super helpful when we have our students for SSP come before the academic year starts for a pre-arrival orientation, and we have our students come even before the standard. And when I welcome the students and families, I talk about how these are transferable skills that you're going to, believe it or not, be leaving college and doing this all over again on your own for your first career very soon. And then you're going to be doing it again a few more times in your life. So these are all transferable skills. And the idea that we can kind of be behind the scenes and show what to expect. So whether that's jumping into the My Courses platform so that we can talk about accessibility, whether it's Blackboard, My Courses, Handshake, pick which one of those you'd like to talk about, but we can kind of preview it and go through it ahead of time. That's the same kind of thing you're going to want to do when you transition into your career. You're going to want to come early. You're going to want to look at your physical space and your digital space and your support network of humans as well, and get there early and preview it. You're going to be doing those same kinds of things. That idea of disclosure and self-advocacy, our students have to make that choice with every professor they meet, with every director of a program. And so it's opportunities to practice with peers as well. What do I say when and to whom? So being able to have multiple opportunities for an evolving discussion, because how I feel today in this group might not be the same in a different group or on a different day. And so what are the multiple ways that people before me have done it? And then I can kind of chew on that and make a good decision for myself. So there's more, but for the sake of time, I'll stop talking with just a couple of things there.
No, that's really wonderful, Kendra. I mean, I think your answer highlights how the types of things you can do to make and include a space more accommodating for neurodivergent individuals are universal, whether it's in education, whether it's in the hiring process, or whether it's in the post-employment process. So thank you so much. We have another great question for Grace. Grace, what do you wish employers better understood about workplace design for neurodivergent individuals?
So one thing I think NHI that's really cool is they have connections to a bunch of different types of programs that help with this kind of thing. We have connections with Integrate and Neurodiversity at Work, which are recruiting third-party recruiters. And we also work with some programs. I've seen Dell which does a really cool working interview thing where instead of you sitting across from an interviewer and answering questions, they bring in a group of people and give you a project to watch how you work. And that's a lot easier for some of our more people who struggle with more communication with that. I've also seen people give questions in advance and allow you to videotape your answers to them and send that in. And that's been really good for some other people. Unfortunately, it is not one size fits all, but different techniques and approaches work really well for different neurodiverse individuals. One thing that is universal, that is a complaint I see from my mentees a lot, is job postings. A lot of job postings just aren't updated. They have they'll say they're hiring for a position that was like 2 years ago, or you'll like apply for electrical engineering internship, and then you get to the interview and they're like, this is actually for programming. So just keeping those up to date with accurate information, accurate when the internship would happen, where it would happen, and just making sure that you are on top of those, because it's going to cut down on so much anxiety if people know what they're walking into and what they're applying for.
Thank you so much, Grace. That is super helpful insight. We're going to get to a few more questions. We have another one from the audience. I think this is for Andrew. How does Wells Fargo measure the success or impact of accessibility initiatives, specifically for neurodiverse populations? What metrics or feedback mechanisms do you find most valuable?
Wow, that's a great question. The website that is included in the chat includes a lot of the success metrics that we're tracking for our neurodiversity program. So, Kendra's comment around, it's not just about the hiring, it's about the retention. It's about the building career opportunities for a community that, may not necessarily have had the best resources in the past. So we're sitting at over 96% retention of participants in this program now, 5 years in, which is astounding. When you think about other hiring programs, you might retain 50% of employees. And so I think this is just a testament to that, if you devise a more receptive environment for aspirational, good talent, they stay and they find career opportunities. I think there's other metrics that are on that slide, but if I bring this up to sort of the broader question, if you will, is that, for me, being the chief accessibility officer, 1 in 4 people in the United States is a person with a disability. Neurodiversity is embedded within our community. At the ultimate measure of success for us is that we're growing our business in this community, and we're helping propel wealth accumulation and job activation, all the sorts of things that this community, that our community wants. And just to steal the words from Tony Coelho, the co-author of the ADA, paychecks, not pity. If Wells Fargo can be the place where people deposit those paychecks, that's a win for me. It's a win for the community. So that's the ultimate measure of success for me.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Okay, we have a question that I think is best for Kendra from Kimberly Alfonso in the chat. How do you advise students who are nonverbal as to how to prepare to explore job opportunities and enter the workforce?
So I'll be honest, I have not specifically coached a nonverbal individual into the workplace. But what I will say is that just as there should be equitable supervision, there needs to be equitable coaching. And so it's not one size fits all. If I were to give a broad statement, though, and I think Grace would probably echo this, is this concept of the goal when I prep our students, it's not to impress. And my students usually do impress on their own, but it's that idea of you got to keep the person comfortable. So if there's something about the way I'm going to present in the interview that might make Andrew a little uncomfortable, like the fact that I'm a little loud, the fact that I move so much, whatever it might be, the fact that I need a fidget in my pocket, what's she doing with her hand right now? If it's so noticeable, I advise the student to call that out on their own, right? It's about self-advocacy. Or if it's processing speed, I let the student know ahead of time, like I'm going to walk in and say, hi, my name is Kendra. I just want you to know to expect a little extra time when I'm answering questions because I'm very thoughtful and it's going to take me a minute to put my words together. It'll be worth the wait, but I just wanted you to know what to expect. And then you're kind of setting the goals and the boundaries for that either way. So if this is a nonverbal student, well, how are you going to address that going into this job interview? What is it that you need in advance? What will you do? Will you use humor? Will you here are the options, and then pick from this buffet for how you're going to navigate it. And my final interview question for everyone is have a lot of questions. Because if you can get that person talking about themselves, right, people remember how you make them feel, which is why I don't need you to impress, darling. I need you to make them comfortable. And I need you to ask them questions. What makes you get out of bed every day, Joseph? Why are you part of this organization? Tell me what a typical day looks like. The more you talk during my interview, the more you like me. And so I give kind of those baseline strategies for any individual.
Thank you so much, Kendra. All right, we have time for one or two more questions. Grace, I wanted to get back to you. Somebody asked specifically to Kendra that you mentioned hosting reverse career fairs. So Grace, if you can speak to that, can you give more information of what that looks like and what participation from your perspective looks like? And if you haven't, then I'll pass that to Kendra to respond.
Yeah, so what RIT calls it is the affinity reception. And instead of us going, because RIT has huge career fairs once a semester, and we generally have about 250 to 300 employers and anywhere up to 1,500 students. So it's a lot. We prepare for weeks. It's a lot. And one option NHI has instead is the affinity reception. So instead of you going to different recruiters' tables, they come for you. There's a bunch of clubs that come. We all have our own table. A lot of it is diversity-related clubs, so NHI, Black Engineers, Alana, Women in Technology, et cetera, et cetera. And there are some employers, it's not all of them, but some of them do pay RIT a little extra to come that day before, and they come to you. So we've talked to recruiters from banks, insurance companies are really into it for some reason. And it's a great way for some of our students who are a little more sensitive to all that is happening in the main fair to still have those awesome networking opportunities and to be able to get some information on different programs employers have.
Thank you so much, Grace. I had actually never heard of a reverse career fair until preparing for this webinar today. So I hope everyone walked away with something interesting that they learned. Let me check and see if we have time. Looks like we don't have any more time for questions, but I will say we have 15 unanswered questions in the chat. So phenomenal, really engaging, and really appreciate everyone's participation. For the questions that we were unable to get to, we will do our best to respond individually. Once again, I wanted to thank all of our speakers for sharing their perspectives and being part of today's discussion. There's never enough time during these webinars, but I'm really grateful for what you all gave to the audience and to me today, to NOD today. Andrew, thank you so much for your and Wells Fargo's partnership. It is truly a privilege to get to work with someone in leading accessibility of one of the largest organizations in the US. Kendra, our partnership with RIT is tremendous. We love working with you. And we know all of the great work that you do for your students as they enter the workforce. And Grace, you are fantastic. I'm sure you have a super bright career ahead of you, and looking forward to seeing where it goes. I'd like to close by letting everyone in the audience know to please save the date for our upcoming live event, Technology and the Disability Experience, which will be held at the Time Center in New York City on Tuesday, September 30th. Will be a really interesting exploration of the ways that emerging technologies, things like AI, extended reality, smart devices, etc., are shaping the accessibility landscape and changing disability inclusion in the workforce. Stay tuned for more information regarding ticketing. And once again, we will be sending all of this information along with a recording, a captioned, transcribed recording of the webinar to your emails in the next couple of days. And we have a brief survey following the webinar that we would love if you can respond so that we can inform our future program. Until then, have a wonderful day. Thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you to our panelists for your amazing insights. And we'll see you next time.